Welcome to the Leadership Conversations with Bukky, where we explore the stories and strategies of diverse leaders shaping our world. Today, we have Yetty Williams, who pivoted from the corporate world to launch one of Africa's biggest parenting platforms, Lagos Mums. We will be chatting about her journey and her mission to help parents navigate the ever-changing online landscape. Yetty and I know each other through Good Future Foundations, as we are both advisory council members. So, Yetty, welcome. Delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, Bukky. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So, before we actually go into the interview itself, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please, by just sharing what it is that you do in more detail?
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks. So my name is Yetty Williams. Gosh, I'm trying to think what angle I start from, but but in summary, I am a certified coach who specializes in digital parenting and family well-being. So what I do is really help my clients, families, to create plans that actually work for them, to ensure that they are using technology and digital tools for good, minimizing the challenges that exist and optimizing the opportunities. And we live in the digital world. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. No matter what industry part of the world you live in, you are impacted by technology. And for many parents, I keep saying we're kind of the last generation that have one leg in analog and one leg in digital. But we're living fully in a fast-paced digital, now AI-empowered world. And there's a lot of struggle. Parents don't really know what is right. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of turmoil. And nobody can parent or make decisions properly if that's what's driving you is fear. So what I try to do is bring a level of just calm understanding of what is, what does it mean to be living in this digital world we live in? That's number one. So there's a part of my framework that includes education. So just educating whoever the audience is or the client, what is existing, what is going on, understanding what their challenges might be. And then I move them typically into a state of empowerment, where when you understand what's happening, you understand your own personal relationship with technology as well, you can start figuring out, all right, do I fall on the side of really fearful, or do I fall on the side of, what, this stuff is good, let me figure it out. And then we move towards empathy. And that empathy is so important because, for example, parents can't say, in my days, that doesn't exist. What our days were and what our children are facing are not even in the same, but that doesn't mean we don't have values. We're not the best influencers in our children's lives. We are, but we must come from a place of empathy, understanding that the world our children were born into, they didn't create it. So it's not about building these walls that cause resistance. So that's basically what I try to do. I call myself a responsible digital citizenship advocate. So, advocating for, let's use this stuff for good. It's here. So that's a little bit about me, but my journey started, which we'll talk about, I suppose, but my journey started many years ago when I became a new mom. And I just had a lot of questions about work-life harmony and wondered, who says I can't have it all? I also recognized back then that technology would be doing something very different in our lives. I didn't fully get what it was, but so I leaned in quite early. And as I say, excuse me, as I say, the rest is history. So I'll stop there.
And it's quite extensive. And I think some of the things that you said, one of them that you struck me is the fact that as parents, we are trying to help young people navigate a world that we don't exist in. It's completely new. No one's aware of what it will be like. So yeah, that is, I think, a very timely role, actually. I'd like to jump into one of the questions, because obviously you worked in the corporate world before. So what mindset shifts help you to pivot from being an employee in the corporate world to being an entrepreneur and founder?
In the early days, I actually used to call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I'm a person of faith. And I remember the day I heard this very quiet word drop and say, nothing is an accident. Stop calling yourself an accidental entrepreneur. Everything leads into everything else. So how did I pivot? I didn't intend to pivot. What happened at the beginning was actually I took an extended maternity leave when I had my second child. So my first one was 2, had my second one. And I decided to take an extended maternity leave and go back to work when my baby was about 18 months and probably would start, daycare or something. So it was during that time at home that I've always loved to write. And, I grew up in Nigeria. I moved to the US where I lived for about 11 years, moved back to Nigeria as a newly married person, and then had my children. And so I had a lot of questions about doing this mom thing, being a wife, living in Nigeria, getting it all. I had all this, my American exposure. And I just thought, who says we have to choose? I want to parent differently. I want to have it all on my own terms. And I kind of started looking into that, researching online. A lot of resources as a new mom would take me to the US or the UK. There wasn't anything for me as a mom in Lagos, in Nigeria. And so that was where I said, you know what? I'm sure there might be other mothers that have questions about figuring out this motherhood thing. Why don't I start a community online to support that? So that's literally how we started. During my extended maternity leave, I started the blog that has now become a movement called Lagos Moms. And the idea was just to offer an online forum to chat with other moms. And, that's basically how we started. Now, the pivot, so when that started, I got the blog going. I did go back to work. And it was a few years after being back at work, I recognized that, this was more than just a passion. I actually loved what I was doing in providing a platform and information and resources and connection to other mothers. So that was how I said, what would it mean if I actually took all my skills from my MBA, my professional experiences, and used that to actually build this into a business? So that's how the pivot started. And what I would say is because I had that experience of having worked, I was able to take those principles and implement it immediately to some extent. Of course, I still made lots of mistakes, but I had a bit of a structure in terms of how this could work as an organization and what did that mean and what did that look like. So that was what the pivot was.
I love that. Thank you. And it's really interesting to hear how the corporate world, in a way, the way you worked before, it gave you the foundations and of what you could then actually build upon as an entrepreneur, which is really interesting. And it's not always obvious like that. So it's really interesting. So I read in previous interviews where you mentioned about the discovery of your 3 Ps: passion, purpose, and profit. So in what ways do these principles guide your work today?
Yeah. So how that came was, I'm a deeply reflective person. Growing up, I was that kid who always asked why. It used to drive my mom crazy because she'll just be like, because I said so. And I'm like, that didn't really answer the question. And I would go back and ask that question again. And so I suspect if I was a child at the time of Google might have been my best friend. But anyway, so I remember when I was doing this and I was reflecting on, wow, I really love this. And by the way, prior to that time, every job I was in, I would literally get bored within the first 6 months to a year. So with every job I was in, I always tried to innovate within it because I was just so bored. I had to do something different to make it a bit more exciting. However, with Lagos Moms, I recognized I absolutely woke up every day loving thinking about what I was going to create and what content I was going to put out there and how I was going to support, this community and group I was building. And then one day it hit me that actually this is not just passion. This is like my purpose. Like I love doing this. If I wasn't paid a dime, and initially I wasn't being paid a dime, I was like, I love doing this so much that this is actually my purpose. This is not just something that's for fun. So that's how we evolved into recognizing that it was really something that I was meant to do, and I felt I was meant to do it. And as a result of that, I poured myself into being the best version of what that means And it was all intrinsic motivation. It was all me. It wasn't because of a KPI I was trying to hit or a review in the office, right? So I really got to build that muscle. And then the third P of profit, that literally came the first time I got a call from an agency who asked me for my rate card. And back then I was like, my what? They said, yeah. Now, mind you, I'm Madam, I can solve anything. So I didn't say, I don't know what that is. I was like, oh, okay. How did you find me? You know, like I said, I was the first Nigerian blog just for parenting. We didn't do lifestyle, we didn't do gossip, we didn't do, it was just purely about parenting, motherhood, work. They're like, yeah, we've been following you. We see what you're doing online and would love for you to send us your rate card because we have a client. And so I called around. I said, let me get back to you. Called around a little bit. I'm like, what is a rate card? And they were like, yeah, basically, you know, something that shows your rates for the work that you do, da, da, da. So long story short, I sat down and I created a very simple, I actually need to frame it. I created a very simple Excel table. And I said, all right, this is my rate card. And I put some things on it and I sent it back to the client. And they were like, I mean, the agency rather. And they were like, okay, send us your invoice. And I was like, wait, what? You know, and it turned out the client at the time was Procter & Gamble. So not bad at all. If your very first client turns out to be a multinational that is in the family, you know, FMCG space. So basically that was the first time I thought, wait, I can actually earn from this. It's interesting. So that's what I call, and for me, it was such an organic growth. It really just evolved bit by bit to the point where when I understood that there was a profit side to it, a revenue model side to it, I was able to bring all those skills from business school, having worked in 9 to 5 to say, okay, what does this look like? How do we create some level of structure around what this means? And that was when I learned about blogging and influencer and all of those things. So that's my 3-piece story.
My goodness. And I just love about the opportunities that came your way from the fact that, as you say, you were intrinsically driven to do this. It wasn't just, say, like a side hobby or side quest. This is something that you really were passionate about, not to overuse that word, and it came through so much. I mean, how cool is that to get your first proper gig from, as you say, a multinational organization, Procter and Gamble? Very incredible. So Lagos Mums has expanded from a Lagos-centered site to a platform reaching thousands globally. And that's actually how I came to know about you during the pandemic. How did you scale your impact while maintaining authenticity and local relevance?
So it's really interesting. The first time I paid attention to Google Analytics on my website, I was surprised to find out that we had visitors from different parts of the world. I was like, oh, okay. But I guess that's the beautiful thing about the internet, right? Once you're out there, you're not gatekeeping anything to just be anyone.
Exactly.
So yes, I might have started with the perspective of I'm talking from my perspective as a mom in Lagos, born and raised in Lagos, and a mom in Lagos. And Lagos is a very dynamic city where if you can survive in Lagos, you can kind of survive anywhere, right? So a lot of my content was with that in mind. You're dealing with traffic, it's a hectic town, there are lots of activities. There's so much. Lagos is like our, well, I guess New York or London of, you know, those countries. So that was basically how I started. And so when I started noticing that, oh, wait, we have visitors coming to the website from different parts of the world. Oh, that's interesting. And I think if you think about it as a mother, as a parent, as a woman, at the core of it, we all want the same things.
Exactly.
You want the best for your family, you want the best for your children, you want to make the right choices for them, and you want to identify your blind spots, which sometimes you don't even know you have. Before, because parenting is one of those things where you get your report card when your kids are grown.
Oh dear. When you put it like that, that was a little bit frightening, actually.
But it is. It's one of those things that you get your result at the end of what, like your 18, I call it a 16-year curriculum. That's when you get your results. And, you know, now we have a lot of research and information to help us do better. cultural nuance. So there are certain articles that would speak specifically to you as a Nigerian mother or Nigerian reader, but a lot of the principles are the same. And one of the things that I found is there was in fact, up to today, there's very little information that's evidence-based that's actually for the Global South.
Right, that's interesting.
Most of the resources you would land on, things you would see in the media, a lot of them, to be honest, we don't do as much research and think tanking as we should on the continent. So a lot of it is US, UK, Western world based. And for me, if I think back to the legacy of why I started Lagos Moms, it was that when I went online, a lot of things I found were speaking to me as if I live in the US or the UK.
Yeah.
And remember, this is somebody who had spent over a decade in the US. So when I moved back to Nigeria, my mindset was, no, wait, I want stuff that supports me.
As you are now, yes.
Right now in Nigeria. And I didn't find it is what led me to say, well, let me start it. So that's really how it's evolved. And now it's evolved. It's totally beyond Lagos. I call it Lagos to the world. It started from there. But now we have customers, clients, readers from various parts of the world, and it's been really cool to see where some of our visitors come from, some of the countries they come from. So that's how it's grown.
Oh, that is fantastic. And you know, as I say, that's how I came to know you, the global reach, as you say, from that. So let's move on. Let's take a bit of I suppose a detour, because you've got, in terms of your qualifications, it's amazing. So you have a wide range of training across life coaching, NLP, CBT, child safeguarding, digital safety, and cyber psychology. Which has most influenced your approach to helping parents navigate the digital landscape?
So I'll go to the first training that really pivoted my mindset, and then I'll talk about the most recent one that has really solidified the space that I work in. So the first training I ever did that caused me to recognize that our brain is the most important muscle in our body was my NLP training. So that's neuro-linguistic programming. And basically the takeaway from that training was your brain is a muscle. The life that you want is more in your control than the life that you've had. Yeah. The life that you've had many times happened to you.
Right.
You didn't choose it intentionally. You're probably running on autopilot subconsciously. You're just making those decisions. But have you ever really sat down and said, who am I? What are my values? What are my beliefs? Do they align with the goals I say I want to set? Are those goals that I set? Or is it goals that society, upbringing, nurturing have created, and I'm just following a script that's not true to me? It's the first time that I feel like my life shook in terms of making me really look inward and say, wait, well, let's hold up here. Who am I? You know, and so my trainer, his name is Lanre Olushola. He's one of the Africa's leading foremost coaches. And so I trained in his academy. And I remember telling him that, you know, that training unlocked something that I call the six-pack brain.
Okay, never heard of that term before.
Because I came up with it. But you know, if you want a six-pack, you can have the best fitness trainer in the world. You got to do the work.
Correct.
You got to do the work. Many times the transformation is actually happening in between the sessions.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing with your brain. You don't see it, but if you want it to be a six-pack brain that's optimized and doing the right things, you have to do the work, and it's all internal before you start to see the external results.
Absolutely.
So to answer your question, that was the first time I was like, whoa, nobody taught us what our brains are this way. And when you understand that, everything starts to shift in your life. So that's the first one that really made a big change in my life. And it really fit with my desires to be a different type of parent, to love my children unconditionally, and to prepare them for the future. You know, like I keep saying, I'm not raising children, I'm raising adults.
Yeah.
Raising an adult, you want to have a roadmap of, okay, what kind of adults do I want these guys to be? And then how do I work backwards to implement the things that would help them get there, right? So that's on one side. Now, the second most pivotal training I've had is my cyber psychology training, which I got a certificate in last year.
Right.
And it's because I've been very fascinated. I don't believe that humans are the same post-screens as we were pre-screens. I'm talking about digital technology, so smart, AI and smart devices and social media and being able to go on the internet and connect with people and consume content online all the time. I think analog-minded humans and digital-minded humans, I believe, are fundamentally different. I believe our psychology, how we think, how we approach the world, how we approach challenges is fundamentally different. And I think that also, not that I think, I know for a fact that that directly affects family dynamics.
Right. So
if as a parent, you might be the best parent in the physical, right? You're making sure your child is eating a balanced diet. You're making sure that, they have nice clothes and they're drinking water and all of those things. But then you're totally negligent when it comes to who they are becoming online. So I've been really fascinated about how there's a shift that has to happen in the fact that we don't live in the same world we used to live in.
True.
And I did one of these free trainings, one of these MOOCs, right? And it was by Jeffrey Sachs. And he basically talked about all the Industrial Revolution. First one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And if you deeply understand it, you realize that every single period brought a lot of change. For example, when the steam engines came, when people could travel by trains, that's when people started moving away from home.
Yeah.
So so for me, I deeply seek to understand why something is. Then I can understand how do I make it work for me. But if I understand the fundamental, engine behind why this is, I don't like getting carried away by emotions or feelings. Like, why is this the way it is? So anyway, that led me to meeting somebody who I was talking to about how I'm so fascinated by this stuff. And I think we're just different, and the way we see the world and the way we respond and how culture influences. By the time I said everything, she's like, have you heard about cyber psychology? And I was like, what is that? She's like, I think you need to look it up, because the way you talk and what you're so passionate about, this is might be a space you want to get into. So of course I went down that rabbit hole of research and I'm like, oh my God, this is the solution, because it's looking at humans at the center of what digital technologies has done to us, the good, the bad, the in-between. So long story short, I found this program it's called IADT. I can't pronounce the word it's in Ireland. But the acronym for the school is IADT. And I got selected, and so I went through a diploma certificate course in cyber psychology last year. And so that has been the most recent pivotal moment in my life in terms of saying, you know what, I think I found the mountain I'm camping on.
Right.
Till I retire, if I retire. And just as I was saying offline before we started, I'm sitting down and I'm reading my cyber psychology textbook for fun. That's when I knew, all right,
deeply immersed in it.
I read one chapter and so many thoughts come from that chapter of, wow, how am I going to take this? How am I going to inform my clients, my audience, the world, about how important it is to understand the principles of what humanity has become because of technology, because of social media, because of the fact that I can create whatever persona I want online. And if as a parent you don't get that, how do you guide your children who might have 3 different personalities? And you don't know that. So you're thinking, okay, my child in front of me is so cute and can know how to fly. But hello, when she's the madam of her WhatsApp group, she's a whole different personality. And you don't know that. So who's shaping that child? So those things are deep to understand. And it's how do you break it down in a way that it's not about fear mongering, but it's about understanding deeply that the children we're raising are dealing with so much. And then you take that to school, you take that to community. So I could talk about this forever, so let me stop there. But that is the journey of the
Yeah.
shift.
Magnificent in that regard. And with the last points that you just shared, Yeti, you're making me, it just reminds me of something that Laura Knight, who we both mutually know, shared about the fact that I think part of the challenges now for young people living in this digital era is the fact that, particularly if they encounter any issues and problems, the duration of time before an adult, whether it's say like a teacher or parent, knows about it now has become longer, in the fact that so much, as you say, things move so quickly. So within 24 hours, something could be a minor issue to a significant impact. And I think that part of the challenge for parents and teachers and educators around young people is in instilling them with, I suppose, the understanding, skills, knowledge, maybe insights and resilience, so that they know what to do and can advise each other effectively to do the right things, particularly as it may be a while before any adult has an opportunity to intervene. So
Mhm.
that's, yeah, that's something that's really quite sobering to reflect upon. So thank you for that. Now, in that, I want to go on to your digital savvy parenting. When you launched this, you said about the fact that you launched this specifically for the focus of family digital well-being. You spoke about it at the very beginning of our interview about some of the digital challenges that parents and carers actually face today. My question to you, Yeti, is this: how does digital savvy parenting help families prepare to thrive in a digital world?
Mm, yeah. So in fact, when I wrote that book, the full title is Digital Savvy Parenting: What the World Urgently Needs.
Mm,
And it's because I find that many parents, by the time they are putting their hand up for help, um, I don't want to say it's too late, but many times the damage has been done. And then it's about remedial work.
yeah.
So it's like, all right, imagine the best case scenario where parents are equipped, are informed and skilled prior to when their children become heavy users of digital technologies, right? So that's the principle behind that. I remember the framework I mentioned earlier, my 3 E's around education, empowerment, and empathy. When
Mm,
you're educated about whatever it is, you can then be empowered to make the right choices, empower your children, and then you have to do it empathy, right? So why I wrote that as a resource was, first of all, many times I speak to people, I talk about this stuff, they're like, oh my God, do you have a book? So for the longest time, I was like, no, I don't, but if you want to get in touch with me, you can. And I decided after 10 years of kind of doing this, that, you know what, it's time to put all of this together into a resource. So what this book is, I'm not about telling you what the problems are. We kind of know what they are.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, what do you do with them? So every chapter ends with actual coaching questions. So wherever you are, let's say you pick the chapter, you read about cyberbullying for the first time. And you're like, whoa, I didn't recognize this was a thing. I didn't know it was so big. I didn't recognize the statistics show that so many children have been victims of it. Da 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 da. All right, what can I do now? Where can I start from? Right.
mm,
So that was the idea, is that the world currently is struggling between legislation and are you banning, are you not banning? But the people who are left scrambling to figure out what the heck do we do about this stuff are the parents. Like, you just left hoping, and hope is not a strategy, hoping that all of these laws and legislation and blah, blah is going to somehow protect my children. So for example,
mm,
in the UK, we know that, phones have been banned in school. Wonderful. But is it really that wonderful when from 3 p.m. to midnight, the children are at home online? So yes, maybe having the phones banned in school means that the children are able to participate in learning in a more engaged way. But my point is, once a child then leaves the school environment, what happens online is just waiting to take all of that pent up everything. And if there are no controls in the home environment, a lot of mess, a lot of bad, nasty stuff can still happen after school.
mhm,
So the idea is, how do we get parents equipped enough to know what to do before ideally your child becomes a heavy user? I say heavy user because once they become heavy users, it can be a problem. And secondly, if you should then recognize that, oops, all right, we've had a lot of loopholes here. What can you start doing to plug it? But you can only support a child when you know what you need to know to help the child. If you come the wrong way, you come at the child with judgment, you don't build rapport, you're not communicating with the young person in your life, whether it's your child, your student, your neighbor, forget it. So that's all I've tried to synthesize into this product that's supposed to help parents move from where they are to what is ideal. And there's no judgment. It's a continuum. So wherever you are on that, there's hope, there's help, and there's support. So that's what digital savvy parenting, that's the mission of what that is that every single parent should know that they can upskill to get to the point where they are confident in raising the digital natives they've given birth to.
And I love about the fact that there's no judgment, but also it's for where you are, wherever you are on the spectrum, which I think is really powerful. Now, where you've got, as you said, many parents who, quite rightly feel overwhelmed by the pace of technological change, what roles can communities, whether it's online, in schools, neighborhoods, what roles can communities play in supporting parents and carers towards digital well-being?
There's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. I've coined my version to say it takes an e-village to raise a child. And what that means is our communities are now online, just as they are offline. And so that means we need everybody in the community to be educated. That means we need everybody to have a basic level of understanding of mental health challenges as, red flags, so that when somebody posts something online or you see a series of posts online that are a red flag of something, you don't have to particularly wait till you say, oh, I don't know if I can get involved. You can immediately step in because you are an adult in that community online, by the way, that's borderless, who recognizes that this is potentially dangerous. This might be a red flag of a mental health challenge, and you can step in. So for me, it's really important that everybody gets aware of what's happening out there so that there's certain emojis and comments and things you will see online from a young person that are like, wait, whoa, hold up. This is a little problematic. And there are a couple of things you could then do. Talking about being a positive bystander, you could reach out to the person, within reason. You can report on the platform. Be like, you know what? I just want to flag that this post is sharing content that I think that fill in the blanks. But my point is, if you don't know and you just bypass it because you have no clue that this is a cry for help, really able to help the person. So that's part of what I think this e-village community must look like, because we're finding out, and it's back to all the studying I'm doing, people are having 2 or 3 selves. There's the actual self, there's the ideal self, and there's the ought self. So the actual self is who you are, right? How you show up, who you actually are. Now, online, you might or might not present that actual self.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal self is the ideal self you wish you were or you want people to perceive you as. So many people have that. Let's think of LinkedIn. Hey, everybody wants to be the best, professional in the world. And there's a way people are presenting themselves. It doesn't mean they're not exactly like that, but there's a level of polish, right? That everyone is showing on LinkedIn, impression management. All right, but if you're an adult making informed decisions, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
The ought self is that person you think you ought to be. And if that's as such deviant or if that's so far away from your actual self, that's when people start to behave in ways that's not actually who they are, right? They start to present a self that's so not them, so far from who they are. And if you can imagine a young child, if that's where they sit, where their ought self, so ought as in O-U-G-H-C, who they think they ought to
be. What influences that though?
That's what I'm trying to get to. So if who you actually are is so far away from the impression in your mind that you believe you should be, you have to live out that other persona. And the gap between who you actually are and who you think you should be in the virtual world, if that gap is really big,
Right.
And that's where a child continues to sit in. You can imagine all the damage, self-esteem issues,
Mm,
live a lie. The worst person you can lie to is yourself.
that's very true.
So if a young person gets used to lying, it's lying to themselves because they don't feel like they're enough as they are, that is a problem long-term mentally as well. So that's why I say this stuff needs to be understood at the core of what it is. So what does that mean for a parent? If you find that your child has 3 or 4 accounts, that's a red flag. Why do you have 4 different accounts on the same platform?
Ah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay. Gosh.
What I mean, you see how as a parent, you got to know what this stuff is. So if your kid suddenly has 4 different accounts on Instagram or wherever, hold up, why? Why are you having 4 different ones? That means you are trying to show at least 4 different types of
Personalities of yourself, or yeah,
on
of
one
yourself.
platform. That's just
Yeah.
it. It's possible they have it on TikTok. Just what I mean. So if you
Mm,
don't know that, it's back to this e-village thing. You can't even help that kid to say, wait, let's talk about this. Why do you have multiple blah, blah, blah? If that's a child who's starting to show challenges with self-esteem, identity, you have an opportunity to intervene. But if you don't even know, and a 13-year-old is having 4 different personalities for 2 years, every single day, hours on end, what kind of kid is that going to be at 12? So, it's really, but I don't see it as just challenges. I see it as opportunities for us all to evolve as humans, to
mm,
evolve in what we call our culture. Our culture has changed no matter where you are. We live in a borderless world,
yeah.
right? So a child can be born and raised in Lagos, and their mindset is more American than their parents realize because all the content and people they connect with online are from a different part of the world. So I don't even remember the question you asked me. I hope I answered, but I know I've just gone in a
It
whole.
is. It's about communities and basically how communities can actually help. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, particularly about taking action as well. I think so many people are fearful of doing the wrong thing or maybe misinterpreting things. But as you say, if you get that gut instinct, this isn't quite right. At least reporting it on the platform is one proactive stance you can actually take. Penultimate question. So looking back to 2014, what have been your biggest lessons when you have evolved as a mother, coach, and entrepreneur?
That nobody has all the answers.
That's so true, which is why I'm chuckling.
It's so
Okay.
true. It's so simple. And when you learn to forgive yourself that you're also doing this is your first time doing this life. Yeah. So let's just all be kind to each other and let's all acknowledge that we're all doing the best we can and
Mm,
we know better. You do better.
yeah.
And nobody's intent, most people are not intentionally trying to mess somebody else up, but it's what you know. So that's one thing I've learned is nobody knows everything. The other thing I've learned through my journey from 2014 to now is everybody needs therapy.
That I didn't expect you to say. Why do you say that's a bit of a bold statement? Why do you say that?
Because we are all such a mixed match of things that happened to us, things that didn't happen to us, needs that were not met as kids, somebody said something when you're in primary 5 and said you'll never amount to anything, or you're so bad at math and you've gone through life hating calculating and you've never sat down to think, actually, why does my heart start to beat fast when I see numbers?
Mm,
Just numbers. So why do you have that reaction? So I joke when I say that, but I really think that the most, at least in my perspective and also in my life, the people that are most in touch with themselves have done some deep work,
yes, I
understand
agree.
where they're coming from. Therapy doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. You don't have to wait till there's a breakdown to find a therapist. Sometimes all it does is to help answer certain questions of why am I the way that I am? How did my upbringing positively affect me, negatively affect me? Okay, if something didn't go the way you expected or it has shaped you or it's not serving you anymore, do you have the skill set? Do
Mm,
you have the toolkit that you need to move you from where you are to where you'd like to go?
yeah.
If you don't have that, you can't move. You will always feel stuck. You always feel unfulfilled. You always feel like there's something about you that's just not enough. But that's because you're not building the internal toolkit you need to recognize who you are, embrace that, and say, this is actually what I need in this season of my life. And if I don't know how to get that, how am I going to get the help that I need to get me there? So that's another big lesson for me, is everybody needs therapy, everybody needs coaching perhaps at some point. And it's not because I'm a coach, I'm not trying to sell my business.
I always say the same thing as well. Yeah.
But no, really, that deep work is so powerful. And it's like a toolkit. It's like when you're learning, when you want to learn to ride a bicycle, what do you start with? Trainer wheel bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
But if I saw you, Bukky, on the bicycle with trainer wheels, I'd be like, what's happening? You shouldn't be riding bicycles at your age with trainer wheels. It's the same thing with adults who sometimes throw adult tantrums.
Yeah.
That's coming from somewhere. You haven't learned how to properly express your emotions. We're allowed to have all the emotions in the world. If you're not angry at injustice, there's a problem with you. However, it doesn't mean that when you're angry, you have the right to just, throw tantrums and hit people and shout. So that's one of the lessons I've had is honestly, you don't have all the answers. And with understanding that means that you can always seek support to help you find the answers that you don't have.
Very powerful lessons there. Absolutely love that. So you've mentioned about one of the books that you're reading for fun with regards to psychology, which is really interesting. So would you like to share anything that you are watching or listening to right now, particularly around digital parenting?
Let me see. I'm listening to gosh, I read so many stuff on that I'm trying to think, okay, which one do I want to stick, talk to? But I would say that it's not directly digital parenting, but I love the work of Gabor Mate.
Yes. Okay.
I love his work.
Yeah.
Probably at least 5 of his books. So when I'm not reading my cyber psychology textbook, I'm reading Gabor Mate. So that's one. And then I try to make sure that I relax, because I've recognized that what I do for work is also what I do for fun. If I'm not careful, I'm kind of always in work mode. I'm kind of always connecting the dots and reading this and saying, I see how I could turn this into content, and I see how I could and my newsletter and all of that. So I try to just do stuff that's just has nothing to do with it sometimes. So in terms of what am I listening to, my daughter just started a podcast, and she's talking about music and looking at music from many different aspects. And her most recent podcast was around the music that she listened to, and how that we try to fit people based on the genre of music that they like. And as if somebody likes rock music, you imagine a personality.
Of course, something comes into mind. Yeah.
And what she was saying was, is that right? Or rather, you listen to music based on how you feel in that season, right? And so her homework in that episode was everybody should create a playlist based on the music that speaks to you right now. And I thought that was such an interesting.
That is not thought about that. Yeah.
An interesting way to. So it got me thinking, all right, what would be on my playlist right now? And it's upbeat music that's just like, so I literally went, and I have some from when I was in uni, and I felt like the world was my oyster. So I have some of that on there. And then obviously some Afrobeat. Afrobeat, you can't be sad if you listen to Afrobeat. You just can't. The beat is da-da-da. So those are some of the things I'm listening to. So yeah, Gabor Mate's work, listening to music, and sometimes binge watching Netflix shows that have no sense. It's just
well, that is part of your well-being. That's part of your downtime. So yeah, no criticisms at all in that regard. Thank you so much, Yetty. Lastly, if there, anyone watching this would actually like to find out more about you, where could they find you? What's the best way to reach you?
Right. So I'm on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn is Yetty Williams. So that's probably the best way to reach me. If you are interested in, the content around parenting, then you can find me on all socials at Lagos Moms, which is our generic parenting material. And then I'm also on Instagram at Yetty Williams, and that will then link you as well to my digital savvy parenting material. And one more way to reach me would be my website. So you go to yettywilliams.com. That will lead you actually to to getting a copy of my book, working with me if you have any questions. So those are the 4 ways I would say you can find me.
Thank you so much. And that's a lovely segue to a book, because this will be an opportunity for one lucky person to actually get a signed copy of your book. Any message that you have for them?
I would say welcome to the e-village. You know, take it one day at a time. We're all doing this together. And I feel like, when it comes to the digital world and, the access our children have had to platforms that were never built with them in mind, we are having the big tobacco moment, right? Where they're starting to recall this stuff. But unfortunately, the genie's out of the bottle. It's a little, so banning something after people have gotten hooked to it is really difficult, which is why for me, my main focus now, a lot of times is for parents with children under the age of 10. Because you can still make sure there's so many things you can do now to ensure that you don't even get to the point where your child has become kind of addicted to the stuff. So I'm not saying past that you can't still do remedial stuff. You can, but ideally don't let it get there. So that's my message, is get on this stuff early. Don't think my kids are still too young. This is the time to actually start.
Okay, Yetty, thank you so much. Thank you for an inspiring conversation. You've shown us how a deeply personal need can actually grow into a mission that changes lives, not just for parents in Lagos, but for families worldwide. And for our listeners, for you joining us today, we will link to Lagos Mums, Digital Savvy Parenting, and Yetty social handles in the show notes so that you can actually learn more and start your own journey towards a healthier digital family life. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of community. Thank you, and join us again soon.
So if you imagine you've got capacity for 100 decisions a day, right? And you use 8 of them or 20 of them, for example, on things that you didn't really need to, then it means that you've only got 80 left for the important stuff. So decision fatigue can sometimes come from 1, how many decisions you made, and 2, not all decisions are made equal. Some decisions actually take time and thought. And again, going back to your capacity in terms of your brain power,